All right, well, there aren't many bands out there with a decade spanning career of IQ, and even fewer of them have those kind of prog credentials that IQ has. Their new album is out, and they do have some expectations, of course, to live up to, those coming from most of us. Will this one meet their high standards? Will a 6 year gap have any impact on their sound, if at all? And what's on their mind this time around? Well, my thoughts on all of that coming right up. Hey, Prognoggins, this is Bleeding Edge. I am Dave. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, so we are talking today about the newest album from Neo-Prog giants IQ. The album is called Dominion, and it is out now, just came out Friday. I'm a little behind. I usually want to get these out ahead of time if I can. But in short, the band is Michael Holmes, guitar and producer, Peter Nichols, vocals, Tim Esau, I think that's how you say that, bass, Paul Cook, I know how to say that one, on drums, and Neil Durant handling keyboards and related technology. So, brief summary of this album. There are just 5 tracks and a 53-minute runtime. Yep, one of them is quite the epic at 22 minutes. That is actually the lead-off track, which is oftentimes the opposite of what you expect. You expect the extended epic to be the one that wraps everything up. Nope, they went the other way around on this one. And they speak about this, at least I've read that they've talked about this as being a concept album that talks about meditations on mortality and loss. Okay, that's their story, and we'll get to what I mean about that down the road. Meanwhile, this one comes 6 years after their last album, and word is that they actually had enough material for a double album this time around. But they felt at this point 6 years was long enough of a wait. They were taking long enough with the songs they had ready. So they put a shine on those real quick and put this album out, and the rest of the tracks they'll hang on to. So we get a single album instead of a double album. And I don't know, kind of the implied promise of a much quicker turnaround on the next album than 6 years. Maybe. We'll see. Meanwhile, you'll hear clips that apparently come from the speech given by Neville Chamberlain, the former, long time ago, Prime Minister of England, or the UK rather, pardon me, at the beginning of World War II, and this is him declaring war on Germany, the recording of that, of him doing that. Despite that inclusion, they do insist the opener is not a song about war. Just saying that, just in case you wondered yourself after having heard it. So, before we get into the breakdown, let me give you that quick reminder. If you could, please throw a like my way if you enjoy this review. And please consider subscribing as well so you can keep up with all my future album reviews and those occasional interviews I throw in there. Got a number of different things I'm doing these days, and we'll see how well I can keep up with all of it without having a breakdown of sorts, but I'll do my best. All right, so review for the new people here. My methodology is I like to listen to every album a minimum of 5 times, and I like to do it in different environments. If headphones on, in my car, with the bigger setup so I can hear it in loud sound and all the other things, a little bit background music and all that, see how it sticks with me. And then I rate each album on 4 dimensions: intellectual, innovative, technical, also called progginess, and emotional. And sometimes, depending on what comes out of that raw score, I might add a personal enjoyment modifier if I think the objective numbers don't really exactly match my personal experience of the album. That varies from time to time. All right, so another thing too, normally I start out with intellectual. For reasons that will become apparent later, I will be starting out with innovative and saving intellectual for last. Bear with me, you'll figure it out. All right, so starting with innovative. Now, here's sort of a little bit of a hard part for me because I'm really pretty much not familiar at all with IQ's earlier work. It might be a strange thing at my age and how far back they go. They're one of the original Neo-Prog bands that came out of the early to mid 80s. along with Marillion and bands like Galahad and others that I can't think of at this exact moment. But I have no basis for comparison in terms of what they did or didn't do previously, or how they maybe on this occasion did or did not progress. So that takes that kind of aspect of this rating away, and I got to focus on just the music I'm hearing in terms of how it presents in the milieu today, in these days of prog. What I can say is this, to me, does not sound at all like what I would call a distinctly 80s prog band. There was some thought in my head that, hey, maybe they were going to sound kind of a time period, kind of dated or something like that. That's not the case here. I could say a few places here and there in the album, maybe they are evocative of early 80s prog rocky pop kind of stuff, like Asia in particular came to mind. Some of the mellower tunes of Asia, Toto, maybe, that kind of stuff. But a blend maybe at this point between modern day Marillion and 80s era Asia, if that makes sense to you. Overall, I mean, the arrangements and the instrumentation, to me, timeless. The style of it is timeless. It doesn't sound like it came from any particular period. There are no idiosyncrasies that you particularly associate with either the 80s or any of the decades since. It stands on its own as a solid piece of modern straight ahead prog that leans into the rock tendencies a little bit here and there. The production is absolutely sterling, and that in and of itself kind of grounds it in the modern day. It's the clarity of the production, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But in those terms, like, I'm not hearing something that sounds like it is somehow regressive or dated. And at the same time, I don't think they're breaking any molds on this time around. They didn't stretch very far outside of what is the standard palette of progressive rock in this day and age. Think in terms of Frost or Big Big Train or Car Mechanic or something like that, just to bring one up that just came out with something. They fit in nicely with those bands. They would sound similar to them, and yet at the same time, I will say they do sound distinctive. Peter Nichols has some really nice, expressive, I don't know if they're lower alto or higher tenor vocals, probably higher tenor. I'll be damned, somebody tell me, I don't know. That are, again, really expressive, really emotive. And they are unique enough that these guys don't come across sounding just like anybody else. They actually surprised me in a few ways, I'll say, in terms of what I expected to hear versus what I got. And surprised me mostly in a good way. But at the same time, innovative. I can't say that I'm hearing anything especially innovative at this point in time, so I will give this a solid 3. Moving on to the technical category. So the label Neo-Prog, I'm sure the band understands, comes with, an expectation or two. They've been around for at least 35, 40 years, and that's pretty much correct. 4 of the 5 members are originals. So they've been doing this for a while. That expectation is met. Number 2, one expects that these guys have probably achieved like high master level status on their instruments in terms of their skill level. Yes, they absolutely do. They hit on both counts of those expectations. And it makes sense. They've been around, they've been doing this for a while, of course they know what they're doing. For the most part, though, the technical aspects of this and the progginess of it is reflected largely in the layers. There are complex arrangements and layers in those arrangements, but the focus is always on melody for these guys. So there's no point where it ever sounds messy, where it sounds like it got away from them, where they're going off the rails with just too many notes coming at you at once. For the most part, they keep it in that restrained range and in a very nice way. The emphasis throughout the album, into my ear, was on tone and texture and emotion. And these guys nailed it. They are not only skilled with their instruments, they are skilled in the art of arrangement, somewhere on a level maybe with, somebody that handles symphonic compositions. Just saying. And there are sometimes there are elements that sound symphonic, some strings and such in there. So it's really cool. Any soloing that occurs throughout the album, it tends to be simply tasteful and expressive, not showy. There's no pyrotechnics. There's no finger exercises that are happening here. And I tend to find that to be consistent with your average Neo-Prog band. I don't know that any of them ever really put a great emphasis on how much they could show off their skills with an instrument. They did on occasion, they did here and there, but it wasn't the standard MO for them. Meanwhile, as I said, the production is just gorgeous. Excellent instrumental separation and clarity. The various sound clips and effects that they use throughout the album will pop, but they don't tend to be intrusive. So they're not in your face, but you know they're there and they stand out. But you can hear, I mean, if you whatever instrument you want to listen to, you can hear it very nicely in this, especially with headphones. And certainly be careful. I listened on earbuds at one point in time. This is an album that has not a huge lower end, but definitely has a lower end that you want to be able to hear, I think, to get the best enjoyment out of the music. So something that can put out the bass is what I'm saying. It's not going to vibrate your car or something like that. You're not going to need a subwoofer to shake the bolts and such loose on your vehicle. But you definitely want to have that full range of sound. It's like an HDR TV. You want the full range of blacks and the full range of whites. This album has a really, really nice production to it. Now, to be honest, I suspect these guys are more than capable of lighting shit up if they want to cut loose at any point in time. I'm just saying that I don't know their history, and I can't say there's a ton that's on display here beyond the arrangements and the tastefulness of it all. So I gave them a 4 on this category. I suspect they're capable of a 5, but on this one, I'm giving it a 4. Now, moving on to emotional. There's a lot I do like about this album, and a great deal of it has to do with the music. And I know that sounds like a strange thing, but really, in this particular case, it just flows so very nicely and really supports the vocals and I think the lyrical content when I understood the lyrics. But they really do a great job of putting out a cinematic flair and evoking moods when they want to. And I really tended to feel a lot more connected to this album within the crescendos of the emotional parts and the cinematic stylings that came out. Much more so than, say, for example, another recent album, The Overview, that was very cinematic. This one, by comparison, makes that one feel comparatively stark. And this one goes a long way towards elevating emotions, I think. I mean, honestly, it makes a lot of sense that they would do those things differently because they were those kinds of albums. The Overview was one focused on, comparing the vast expanse of space to our mundane, brief lives, our existence that has almost no meaning in the grand scope of everything that's out there, while this one, very much conversely, seems to, and reportedly does, meditate upon how the brevity of our lives can make things that we do even more impactful upon those we leave behind and those who've left us behind. Or, I don't know. I could be making shit up right about there. I don't know. We'll circle back to that in a little bit. That's just kind of my take. This album was meant to connect more to humanity, whereas the other one sort of distanced itself from humanity. That's my experience of them. What I really say, though, is, again, the part that I connected to most with this album were those parts that were just so grandly uplifting, that there's almost a sense of celebration of life within this album. It's those crescendos in the songs, and there's times where it gets a little harder edge to it. There aren't many of those, and they're not, honestly, that hard edge. They just stand out in comparison to a lot of the music around them, the kind of dreamy clouds of floaty music that bracket those harder edge parts. But when I say harder edge, I'm just kind of talking about in the range of, again, Asia, and they're probably especially more their second album than their first one. The first one was a bit more hard rock. Alpha was a bit more mellow and a little more pop to it. And I think that's where these guys fit in a little bit at times with those harder edge sections, but they really do kind of stand out compared to the more dreamy and quiet passages. And those were really what caught me by surprise at first, as I was listening to the album the first time with my attention split between tasks. And it was those points where all of a sudden these guitars start riffing a bit and I hear a bit of distortion in there, which took me by surprise and was really cool. And I really enjoyed that. So that was a bit of a surprise, and how modern it sounded was a bit of surprise based on my expectations going in. So again, this is more of a timeless kind of album. So for me, by the end of the album, there really was, just in the music, excluding the vocals and the lyrics, there was this sense of having been on a journey. And that as you get to that final song and the final notes of that song, you're reaching some sort of bittersweet ending. Mostly happy, and yet, tinged with sadness ever so slightly, kind of like this.
Do not sad, do not weep, for not all tears are an evil.
So for that emotional connection I have with this album, I rated this one a 4. I would say overall, as far as the albums I've listened to this year, this one probably hit me in an emotional level more than almost any of them. It may be the high points so far this year. The other ones were just much more, for me, intellectual affairs. Speaking of intellectual, we are at that final category that normally is our lead-off category. So I had to put this one at the end this time around because it was the one that caused me the greatest consternation in trying to put this all together. So one standard I have really is that in general, if I am of a mind to rate something above a 3 on an intellectual category, it does have to meet one particularly important criteria: that I understand what the hell it's about. I'm sorry, but I gotta say that this album was a bit frustrating for me in terms of the lyrics. I had the album available to me in advance, so I was listening to it prior to the release date. I would have loved to have gotten this review out before that, but scheduling just didn't work that way. But as I was listening to it and had to at times sit and listen because I wasn't given a lyric sheet, I kept feeling like I'm hearing words and I'm hearing things that make sense and sound nice, but I'm not following. And at a certain point, you begin to question yourself. And I don't like it when I have to question my reading comprehension. So, meanwhile, by the time I get around to writing a lot of this, okay, the lyrics are out somewhere. And I managed to pull them up and listen to the album with the lyrics in front of me. And hoping, I would get something out of that. Yay, lyric sheet. You should have... you should have seen my face when I realized it didn't make a damn bit of difference. I still didn't know what was going on. Well, don't get me wrong about this. I don't want to dump on Peter Nichols, who, if I understood correctly, I think I read somewhere, he wrote the lyrics, or he wrote them with Michael Holmes. I don't want to dump on anybody. These lyrics really are actually very poetic. And there's some really nice turns of phrase throughout. I think one of my favorites was, talking about the right brain and left brain, and when the right brain has nothing left, does the left brain have nothing right or get nothing right? I'm like, that was cool. I like that turn of phrase. I love little bits and things like that. And those are peppered throughout the album. But the rest of it is so vague. I couldn't figure out what I was reading about or what it was. I mentioned the first song's not a war song. I'll be damned, I wasn't sure when I was reading the lyrics whether it was a war song. So there was some confusion there. I don't get many albums like this where I can read lyrics and go, I really don't, I'm not, like there are times when, and one of the albums I reviewed earlier this year, like the lyrics I think were really vague because I think there wasn't much beyond the surface to say. And it just wasn't that writer's forte. So they got about as deep as they were willing to get, either because they didn't want to offend any possible audience member or listener or record buyer, or they just really didn't have any deeper to go. I got meanings out of all of it. They just, beyond sloganing, there wasn't much there. This, I think, is the opposite. I think there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of meaning under these words, but they're just so vague that I wasn't grasping exactly what was to be said. And trust me, I am someone who enjoys vague lyrics for the sake of people being able to add their own interpretations to the music. That's one of the cool things, is if you can achieve something where you're saying something and it can be pretty clear and you know exactly what you're saying, but somebody else can also get another meaning from it, that's awesome. That's cool. That's stuff I don't do well. All I know is I'm reading these and I've got ideas, maybe what's going on, and ideas and words coming to mind, like portentous or mysterious or metaphysical or star-crossed lovers or loss of a friend or grief in general. At least to some of those, as I understood, when I went to the band's website and read about the album a little bit more after I'd listened to it. I try to look at other outside stuff after I listen to the album just so it doesn't color my interpretation. But I do understand that these were meant as meditations on mortality and our relationships to one another and dealing with loss and what happens afterwards and looking back at that kind of stuff. So I was somewhat on the right track with a lot of it, but man, I got to say, it was a bit maddening. I just wish in the end it didn't have to be explained to me for me to understand. Like, again, I'm all for vagueness, but I don't know. Sometimes, folks, you got to throw me a frickin' bone here. And the fact that I needed an explanation, okay, I don't know. Honestly, like I am. I don't know what comes across out there, but I actually am a pretty smart guy. My mother had me tested. My reading comprehension is plenty solid, or usually has been. You get to an age where you question yourself. And this one had me questioning my intelligence and wondering, is this me or is this him or them? I don't know. that lack of certainty is a little annoying at times. Anyway, it's not that I dislike them at all. And I don't think they hurt the songs, to be perfectly honest. I think everything in these songs worked so nicely together, regardless of what the lyrics were saying, that it didn't take away. It didn't hurt. It didn't mean much to me in the sense of disliking anything. I mean, for comparison, say, yeah, back in the day, I really liked The Final Countdown, the song and the album by Europe. Let's be honest. The lyrics are complete rubbish on that album and that song. I kind of feel bad making that exact comparison, but at the same time, it's fairly accurate. Ultimately, what it is about, it is what we're hearing. It is the music, it is the vocals, it is the sounds that is going to connect us to music first and foremost. The lyrics, in my mind, have always been secondary. The song is elevated further if the lyrics really have a lot of deep meaning to me or strike me as somehow deep. There's a better word for that I'd like to use. Can't think of it right now. But deep and meaningful. And if the lyrics don't mean a hell of a lot, okay, I can kind of live with it. Once in a while, you have some lyrics that are really so dumb they take away from a song. That's rare in my experience. Usually I can blow that off and go, hey, the sounds I hear sound wonderful. I love it. So, yeah. In the end, even though I couldn't quite perceive all the ideas and thoughts contained in these songs, I'm feeling pretty confident there's a lot of thought behind them. Kind of like, at the same time I can look at abstract art and nod my head in appreciation as if I have any idea what the hell I'm looking at. I don't know. Shut up. Don't judge me. So I'm just saying I'm going on a 4 here. I trust the intellectual content is there. I just can't perceive all of it. Maybe that's my failing. I don't know. You guys can tell me what you think. Meanwhile, what that gets us is, let's see here. We have got in reverse, not in reverse order, but in different order than normal. We've got intellectual 4. We've got technical 4. We have got emotional 4, and we have innovation coming in at a 3. When you do all the math together with those, you get a raw score of 3.75, which is actually a very solid score according to what I've done so far this year. In the end, honestly, I vacillated about applying a modifier to this one. Like I said, the raw score is solid. And even despite my frustration with the lyrics, I quite enjoy the album. It's a very pleasant album to listen to. The emotion and the cinematic grandiosity and the vocal performances really did the heavy lifting when the lyrics fell short in terms of communicating the concepts of the songs and the emotion of the songs. It's hard to not come away from this album feeling uplifted. That being said, when I look at the final scores of the other albums I've liked, the few other albums I actually liked a little bit better this year, I think this one fits quite nicely just at that next lower tier, just slightly below those. So at this point, I'm not going to apply a modifier, and the final score will remain at 3.75. A few final thoughts on it. Like I said, it's a really, really pleasant album to listen to. This is for sunny days and relaxing afternoons and just feeling good. Much of prog can often be very serious and introspective, sometimes even dark or coldly analytic. And this one is a very nice palate refresher in amongst those things. It's the kind of album that, like in the last couple of years would be that one that really just kind of brings my mood up, like Lalu, The Fish Who Would Be King, and Big Big Train, the likes of us. There we go. I really should.
I'm not quite sure how.
I did not say Alexa, but I should have turned the little bitch off. She's gone. All right. Anyway, it's really the kind of album that just makes me want to finally find the time to investigate their back catalog. Yes, I just committed person on AI violence. Hopefully it doesn't get me flagged on YouTube. I'm going to leave it in there. All right. So I do wish they made more use of backing vocals, because those parts of the album and we had the harmonies with Peter Nichols, that was so cool sounding to me. That was my favorite parts of the vocals. I mean, he did a great job overall. He really sounds a good voice. But when the backing vocals were in there too, it was just really chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Words I can't say and I shouldn't try to say because I end up like I'm drunk. All right. Highlight track for me was the closer, Neverland. 2 words. It really just, it brought the whole album home emotionally. It just felt like this was, here's the end of our journey, here's the end of what's going on, and just leaves you feeling good at the end. It's a real up note. So, how about you? What do you think about the album? I'm hoping you listened to it by now. If you haven't, go listen to it. Do recommend it. How's it compare to their previous works? If you're familiar, if you're a fan of the band, how do you think this one ranks among their catalog? Anyone else out there left as befuddled by the lyrics as I was? I don't want to find out I'm the only one, but I guess I should do a little reality check here and find out if that was just me. Do whatever. Tell me what your thoughts are. Engage with the comments section below. Meanwhile, thanks again to all of you watching. I really am very grateful to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, if you want to check out a really cool All-Prog radio station, just go to TuneIn Radio or go to Live 365. Find the Expanse all day, all night. It's all prog. Sundays is the Brain Salad Sunday, where it's nothing but prog from the 60s and 70s. All right, so next up, I'm going to be circling back to an album that I have to admit got buried in the deluge of albums this past month. It also got buried in my inbox a little bit because I kind of had an inside track on this one. That is an album called The Passing by Jason Roberge. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. I have a problem with mangling foreign names at times. It's the first time I've seen Roberge, and I'm going to hope I got it right. If I didn't, I've now gotten it wrong twice. Yay me. All right, so that's all I have for now. As always, this is me reminding you to never fear to deviate from the norm. And until next time, this is Dave saying, keep it proggy.